Good afternoon all. Welcome to this meeting of West Berkshire Council Governance and Ethics Committee. Today, the 16th of November, 2020. I'll ask Moira Fraser, the clerk, to actually introduce the procedures for the meeting, please, if you will, Moira.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to say, this meeting this afternoon will be chaired by Councillor Jeff Beck, and Councillor Jeremy Cottam is the Vice Chairman. The other members of the committee in attendance, as well as substitutes, are Councillor Rick Jones, Councillor Tony Linden, Councillor Tom Marino, Councillor David Marsh, Councillor Andy Moore, and Councillor Claire Rolls. Councillor Owen Jeffrey is here as a substitute, I'm assuming, for Councillor Jeff Mays. We also have two parish councillors with us this afternoon. They are Councillors Jane Langford and Councillor Barry Dickens. And although they are able to participate fully in the discussions at the meetings, unfortunately, they are not permitted to vote on any of the items. We also have Barry Morris from our external auditors here this afternoon. That's the external auditors are Grant Thornton. He's also not permitted to speak, so if he does wish to speak, if you could let us know, we will suspend standing orders in order to allow that to happen. We also have Councillor Joe Stewart in attendance, who is the portfolio holder for this area. And again, Councillor Stewart is not permitted to speak unless we suspend standing orders in order to allow that to happen. If it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone has raised their Zoom hands on any matters, I will ask the chairman or remind the chairman to invite you to speak. Voting on any items will take place by physically raising your hands. The clerk will confirm the outcome of the vote once that has taken place. Unless the committee asks for the vote to be recorded, this will not be recorded in the minutes. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn, and I will also ask the committee and inform the committee of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it's a short adjournment, you'll be able to join again using the information that you've submitted already. In addition to all the members that are attending, we also have Joseph Holmes and Julie Gillespie and Jen Bruning advising members of the meeting, and Phil Rumans is the Zoom host for today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Could I just ask you to clarify the position of Councillor Abbs at this meeting? My understanding is that Councillor Abbs is a substitute.
Councillor Abbs, are you substituting for anyone?
Attendance in case needed, but it doesn't look like I'm needed, so I shall leave you in peace if that's okay.
Okay, you're welcome to stay if you wish.
So tempting, Councillor Beck.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, members and parish councillors. Moira, could I ask with regard to item 1, apologies? Do we have any apologies, please?
Chairman, we have Councillor Owen Jeffrey substituting for Councillor Jeff Mays at the meeting today.
Right, okay, I thought that's right, yes. Okay, thank you. Right, you are. Moving to agenda item 2, the minutes of the last meeting. I personally am sort of quite satisfied that these represent a true recording of what took place. Could I just mention, in case anybody wishes to raise it, on pages 2 and 4, there are some items mentioned which will be brought to the next meeting, which is this meeting. Can I just say to you that this is actually work in progress, and that those items referred to will be brought to the February meeting. Could I possibly have a proposer and a seconder, please, for the minute to the last meeting? Please.
So proposed, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Have you got those names, Maura? Can you hear?
But I just ask everybody to indicate that they are in acceptance of the minutes by raising your hand. Chairman, I can confirm that the minutes have been approved.
Thank you very much. Moving to item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any specific declarations of interest peculiarly relevant to the agenda items this afternoon? I don't see anybody.
Chairman, we've not been alerted to any.
Right, you are. Thank you. Right, moving now then to item 4, which is the forward plan. Can I ask officers and members if you have any amendments or suggested amendments you would like to make to the forward plan? Has anybody got any comment they wish to make? I don't see anybody. Yes, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed that the agenda for the 1st of February meeting seems very full, perhaps slightly over full, and all the other meetings, including this one, seem relatively bare. And I just wondered why that was the case, and could we even things out a little?
Would the officers like to comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so the reason for that is because we were due to have a number of the external audit papers for this meeting, but because of delays to the audit, mainly due to the pension fund audit not being complete, we've put those papers back because we won't be in a position to better sign those off until the pension fund audit has been completed. So that's why there's a lot more papers for the next meeting rather than this one or the one afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Josie, for that. Just to clarify, members, in case you were not actually present when we had a preamble with regard to this meeting before the meeting started. Joseph did actually mention that the Berkshire, the old Berkshire County Pension Fund, as it used to be called, are delayed in producing their sort of audited report, and thus it is beyond the control of both this council and our auditors to actually sort of bring some of the information forward for this meeting. So let us, fingers crossed, we will be okay for February. Thank you very much indeed for that one. Those matters raised by the councillor are duly noted. Moving now to item 5, could I ask Julie Gillespie, please, to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This first report of mine is the audit plan update report, which I report to a committee on a quarterly basis. This report covers 2 quarters, the first and second quarter of this year. To summarise the work, there's no audit work that we've completed during that period, which gives essential processes of weak or very weak opinions. There is no follow-up reviews given an unsatisfactory opinion, but there was one primary school that was given a weak opinion. There's tables attached to the report. The completed work is set out at Appendix A, work in progress is Appendix B, and this year, because I prepared a separate anti-fraud work plan, I've put progress against this, which is set out at Appendix C. What I'd mentioned to the committee, I think it was in April, I mentioned that to my year-end report, that there's likely to, sorry, it was the August meeting, I mentioned that there's likely to be an impact on audit work of the for COVID. At that point in time, there hadn't been much of an impact, but in 5.4 and 5.5 of this report, I'm mentioning that as of Q2, we've spent approximately 55 days on COVID-related work, and I expect that to increase over the next 2 quarters. There's certain COVID grants that the council is receiving where it requires an independent sign-off by internal audit, so we have to do work to be able to sign those grant returns off. There's also other grants that I'm going to do a risk assessment of to determine if I think it would be worthwhile carrying out some further assurance work for the council, because there's some large values involved in some of these grant claims. So I'm estimating at the moment it's possibly about 50, 80 further days of work for this COVID related work. And that's as much as I thought I would give an overview of the report. If there's any questions.
Thank you for that. Members, please feel free to ask Julie whatever you like. Councillor Royals.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for that. It's really helpful. I just wondered, perhaps something to take offline, but is it possible to get the framework that you have done some of these audits against? So where you sort of say you've done an audit on some of these topics, is it possible to get more information from you relating to specific ones in terms of what you actually looked at as part of that audit?
It depends. What do you mean? Do you mean the completed work on Appendix A that's listed?
Yeah, the completed work. So if there was a particular audit that a member was interested in, are we able to, I think I have requested some audits before. So A, see the audit, but also see what framework you've used, actually what you've done.
I think it'd probably be better taking it offline to know which particular ones you're wanting. So you said the framework, it would depend on if it was standard assurance work, whether we've been requested to do the piece of work. So it depends.
So kind of what you've actually done, really.
Well, it depends on the nature of where the request came from, if it's standard assurance work or whether it's more of an investigation or whether it's, so it would vary what information we could give depending on what's listed there, because there's quite a bit listed there, isn't there?
Is that because some of that is confidential? I'm not sure for the public's benefit, like why we're not allowed to view some of them. Is there some restrictions around that?
It would if it was investigation related. So about on the completed work, I don't think there's actually anything listed on there. I think that's work in progress. So that wouldn't be an issue of confidentiality there or not. Audit reports are treated as confidential. We do not publish them as standard. A lot of councils don't publish them. So it depends to what degree the information to go into a public arena. But yeah, I think we'll take it offline because the nature of the work that's on there, it depends why we did it, the nature of it. And you say the framework, our approach to it and what we covered would vary depending on why we did the work in the first place.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Thank you.
All right.
Councillor Moore, you had a hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Julie, thank you for the report. In the Annex B, Appendix B, the current audits, quite a number of these are described as testing. Could you unpack that slightly for me and just what does testing mean and what sort of, does that mean it's very close to the end or does it, is it pretty early days?
It's middle. For each piece of work that we carry out, if it's standard assurance work, we carry out background work, put some terms of reference together to scope it. Then once we've agreed the scoping, we then test it. So the testing is the main bulk of getting the evidence and the assurance, so one way or another. Once it's tested, then it's ready for review, where myself or one of my colleagues would review the working papers, review the accuracy of it and give a second opinion of what we've looked at. And then after that, a draft report. So they're the stage and then the final report. So testing's mid-range, and that's where the bulk of the work's carried out to look at records, obtain evidence for us to be able to give an opinion.
So you're not testing findings at that stage with those that you found them?
The testing is if it's a general assurance work, what we are wanting to do, we look at what we call expected controls. So for the scoping of the review we're looking at, we're saying to ourselves, what controls do we think should be in place to give assurance that this is well controlled and that we don't have any issues? So the testing bit is we've identified what we think should be in place as good practice. And then the testing is we're looking physically what's been put in place compared with our expectations and then coming to conclusions.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, sorry, I just got another question, if I may.
Yes, Karen.
Thank you. Julie, on page 13, where you've identified Schools Week, I'm sorry if I've missed this in the report. Can you just sort of elaborate on that a bit more? Where it's in the table, it says week. For...
Sorry, I'm just getting on page 13, yes. So when I'm saying that one is weak, that is covered in Appendix A, completed work. And that's where I've mentioned about Welford and Wickham's a weak opinion, but in the main report I've mentioned what the key issues were about financial information going to governors could be expanded on, and the arrangements for auditing the school fund. So hopefully I've put enough information in there.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any further questions of the officers? Members? No? In that case, this recommendation is to note only. We do not need to take a vote on same. So we'll now move to item 6. And again, I'll ask Julie if you will kindly introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is a follow-up to a report that went to committee in, I think it was April this year, where we carried out a review of the effectiveness of the audit committee and benchmarked against SIP for good practice. And as part of that, we prepared a report, and the report had some recommendations for improvement. So we've taken another point at that point in time. It was agreed with committee that an officer group, which is called the Finance and Governance Officer Group, would go away and work up an action plan with a bit more detail of how to implement the recommendations in that report. So this follow-up report, it basically is showing the action plan, which is Appendix A, and it's taken all the previously agreed recommendations that's come to committee, and what we've done is put some more information on how we think that can be achieved. And it's that information for members to discuss and agree if they're happy with what we're proposing as an action plan. We've also, on some of the actions, already made progress. For instance, one of the recommendations was to review the scope of the committee, the terms of reference, and ensure it reflects good practice. So there's a document attached to the report, which is the revised terms of reference. There are other documents that are attached where we're proposing a more comprehensive training programme. And there's also a document on a self-assessment for members to look at for their skills set and to identify any possible training needs. All those things were covered in the report as these are areas for improvement. What we've tried to do is put this action plan of work where we think this will help, and we've also come up with some documents where for members to look through.
Thank you for that, Julie. Could I ask you just to sort of expand a little bit on the proposed draft training schedule, which, as members will have probably noted, is quite considerable. I think it's about 11.5 hours in total. It's a question of, clearly we would need to break that up into a series of sections. And it's a question of how, with what frequency we would require to be sort of updated on these particular aspects. But clearly, there are some aspects of the governance of this committee which basically do not change from year to year, others which do. So would you just like to give us a little bit more
when was
have in mind?
When I put this together, I think it was a lot of this training, this level of detail has never been provided before. And I think this is where some of the gaps are in the knowledge base for members to be able to challenge some of the reports that we provide. So I don't think these would need to be done on a frequent basis. New members, I think that it would be very useful to go through. And if you break it down by the three key areas, the financial accounts, internal audit and risk management, if you break those down, you know, it is not that much time per subject matter. And some of the work that we do, internal audit, financial accounts, some of it is quite complicated things that we do, and the information and the background to it. So I think what we're trying to do is give enough information to set the scene of how some of this should work, but also then give practical examples of, for instance, the report that my update report that I've just presented is to go through that and actually say how and show how it's been put together and what information, where it comes from, how we've come to our opinions. So it gives members more of a background to feel confident to be able to challenge or query some of the information. But I wouldn't expect this training on a regular basis. It needs a certain basic skill set to build up the knowledge to, I think, for the committee. So where we're coming from.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions, if you have.
So just to follow that, if I may, just to follow that up, would it be helpful in that set of recommendations to indicate whether that's a training that's, you know, should be reviewed annually, or a once off on appointment, or once per council period?
4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think this was just a starting point, because previously you'd have, members had one session of each thing for an hour, a couple of hours. It was quite a high level overview. So all this is doing is breaking it down and giving a suggestion. This is the way forward. But yeah, we can include the time frames, suggested time frames as well. Members might want it more frequently. They might have had a session and think, oh, well, you know, once they've understood where it's coming from and they've seen more reports coming through, thinking, I wouldn't mind reviewing that again, just for my understanding. So yeah, it doesn't need to be set in stone, but I wouldn't expect it to be every year on that sort of frequency at all.
Councillor Rose?
I think Councillor Jones was ahead of me, but if you're happy, I'll ask my question.
Carry on.
Julie, thanks for that. I think it's really, really helpful table. I was just interested to know why there was no timescales against in Appendix A, where there was no sort of timescales against some of those points or all of those points. Is that just because it's a starting point?
It's a starting point, and I think that when I'm going back to it, actually officers have done as much background as they can to actually prepare this report. So it's members of the committee looking at this now, and whether you agree with what we've done. We can't actually make progress on this now unless it's agreed.
And then you'll put timescales around it so that there'll be some measurements and
like the training. Probably it would be next May. It would make sense next May because there could be changes in membership as well. So yeah, I think we've done as much as we can going to the officer group to put this forward to members. Now it's you to agree whether or disagree with what we're proposing for us then to take it to the next stage.
Councillor Moore, do you have a question?
No, thanks, not at the moment. I've got one subsequently, but I think Councillor Jones was next.
Yes, right. Councillor Jones?
Thank you. Yeah, I get the tenor of the report and its predecessors. I believe it's telling us effectively that we need to be a lot more committed and a lot more proactive as a committee in order to do our job effectively. And I don't disagree with that. I support the action plan, certainly the first 6 actions. I think the 7th might require a working party to go through. Having said that, though, I looked at the first section of the new terms of reference, and I was just slightly amazed that there were 47 responsibilities on that terms of reference, and I'm not sure that a committee like ours can really cope with 47 responsibilities, even if we are committed and trained. So I think we need to look at that quite carefully.
It does sound a lot, but they're broken down into quite a bit of detail. So if you brought them up to the higher level of the subject area, they're quite subsections of each other. If you did one, you'd be doing the other as well. And all those are actually in the SIP for Good Practice. That's where we've come from. I suppose it's what we could aim for, rather than necessarily your point, is it that achieved? But I think it is. Like I say, in that if you take internal audit and put them together, a lot of the subsections, or if you did one, you'd be covering the other at the same time. It has just been quite definitive to make it clear, rather than just in a high level summary, if you see what I mean.
I guess we need to work through them and just see what it means in practice.
Yes, what it would entail. Yes, I agree.
A scan through looks quite daunting. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Moore?
Thanks. I mean, Chair, were you going to separately look at the terms of reference, those having come up, or are you interested in taking comments on those now?
Take the comments now, if you will.
Okay. I mean, I absolutely agree with Councillor Jones. The 40-something items, left me a bit, overwhelmed. I mean, I think there's already an attempt to break them into, I think it's about 5 sections. I just wondered whether, in fact, some further work couldn't produce maybe, 3 or possibly 4 elements to each of those 5 sections, and maybe a couple of, sort of sub topics under there, so that at a reasonable glance we can get a feel, right across the piece. Whilst I'm on those, number 12 in the current listing seems to be a little bit out of odds with everything else. It doesn't start with a 2, and it's it's about the council and its nomination, and that may, I'm not quite sure whether that, I mean, if that needs to possibly come in the preamble of the section. And if I go back to functions, which is para 2, the second paragraph in that section 2 starts, the purpose of our audit committee is there a separate audit committee, or is this actually a reference to the Governance and Ethics Committee?
It's reference to the
I'll
government.
let Julie respond to that.
I'm trying to find the relevant section, sorry.
So in terms of proposed terms of reference,
Page 33.
subsection or section 2, the functions, and then paragraph 2 within that box.
Councillor Moore to Governance and Ethics Committee. I think it's just wording from
It's the officers.
but that's fine. We can change it. That's no problem.
Yeah, good. There isn't another committee that's
No,
working somewhere that. No, good. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
There isn't another council members committee.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think, I mean, these just in terms of editorial stuff, these go on a bit. We get to annual reports, and there's a whole reference to the Localism Act and such like. I mean, I think if some background is helpful, but really, annual reports should say there need to be these annual reports. It just then I think the thing's a bit more assimilable. Thank you.
Okay. Jane, have you got your hand up? We can't hear you. I think you're muted. Phil, can you possibly?
Yes. Can you hear me now, Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
I can hear you now. Let's start again, please.
Yes. I'd just like to make a comment about this. One of my general concerns in life, as it is becoming and has become, is that in some ways the benefit of having a committee in the first place is that you have a collection of people who have a variety of different life experiences and knowledge, which they can bring for the benefit of this committee. And I sometimes worry, and not just about this committee, but in general, that sometimes we almost train ourselves and restrict ourselves and standardize ourselves out of existence and out of the ability to bring in our free thoughts and experience and knowledge. It was just a comment, really.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Rolls?
Chair, just picking up on something Councillor Moore said, I think it would be helpful because it also, I agree with Councillor Jones that actually this list is pretty daunting. Perhaps it would be helpful that we actually include the frequency of some of these actions. So it's very clear that there are annual actions, particularly around the financial piece. But actually, for example, the anti-fraud plan, the code of conduct, if it was clear that we only reviewed those every 2 years or whatever they needed, or every 18 months, whatever that looks like, I think it becomes less daunting. I think when you're presented with a list that you believe you have to do going basis, then that might make it a bit more manageable. And it would also focus prioritization around those specific areas, which I think would be helpful to break it down a little bit more.
Yes, I totally agree with you, yes. Any other questions from members?
Yes.
Tony?
Yeah, on the fire authority, we've also been looking at frequency of meetings. I think the code of conduct, we're looking on a yearly basis. There's also been changes as well that we've got on our agenda tonight on the fire authority. So there may be things that I know speaking to Moira that we've already, Moira Fraser, that we're looking at. So there are things that could be on a longer term basis and things that we might need to do more regularly. But I agree with Councillor Rolls. We don't want to be overburdened by this, and we just got to get it right. And I think we've also got to have some concerns. I know I'm a losing voice on this, but certainly what we raised before the meeting, that we do have our parish council representatives that maybe they do need paper copies of certain kinds to assist them in their work. It certainly is useful having some of that paperwork when you've got detailed work to go through. I think on this agenda, I had a good old read about it last night. I didn't really need that, but sometimes it's easy than just electronically anointing pages. You know, we do it for licensing appeals and other appeals and planning. So I know we've got this thing about the paperless office, but in today's environment, working on COVID restrictions, it might be useful to look at again. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, I did actually raise this question of the training with officers last Friday. Clearly, we need to sort of get this sort of defined a little more clearly, to put it politely. I don't mean that impolitely to the officers. They are setting forward for our consideration. Could I sort of suggest that the officers between now and the next meeting come up with a sort of a proposed schedule of training sessions and the frequency of same, and obviously in so doing that they actually prioritize certain ones which are likely to change more often. Would that sort of meet with your sort of approval? You don't have to agree with me. Would you like to show that by a show of hands if you agree with that? That we ask the officers to bring a sort of a schedule to the next meeting of what they are actually proposing in sort of with regard to timing, etc., etc. Okay, those in favour of that, please show your hand, please. Okay.
It looks like everybody's agreed. What I would say then is that as Billy mentioned, members are then content with the contents. And
yes.
Then if you're saying you're happy with the contents, we'll come back with a schedule. But we needed members to agree the contents before we could.
Yes, that's what I was endeavouring to say. Thank you. Okay, everybody in agreement with that? Okay, thank you. Right. Members, do we...
Chairman, sorry. Councillor Jones has got his hand raised.
Yes, right. Councillor Moore, is it?
No, it's Councillor Jones, Chairman.
Right,
And
okay.
me.
So
I think Councillor Moore wants to come in afterwards.
Afterwards, again.
Okay. Please proceed, Councillor Jones.
Right. Yes. No. I do agree with you about the training plan. I think that's right. I just wanted to reinforce the fact that the general thrust of this, I fully agree with. I think the action plan is correct.
Yeah.
And although I've got some concerns about the layout of or the content of the terms of reference, I still think that we're going in the right direction, and we do need to become active and proactive as a committee. So, happy with that.
Okay.
Can I
Thank you.
respond to Councillor Jones on that comment, please?
Councillor Moore?
Sorry, I missed that.
Yes, can I respond to Councillor Jones's comment?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
Well, what would probably be a good idea, if we're coming back to committee with more details of the training, how about I also have a go at, on the terms of reference, recategorize, or looking at the categories again to try and group them together, but also put some frequency on that Councillor Rolls mentioned, which is a very good idea. So
Yes.
again, it looks less daunting, or you've got a better idea of what's involved in each of the activities. Would that help?
Great.
Do that
That'd
next
be really
time.
good. Yeah.
You can't say that the officers ignore us. Thank you.
No, indeed not.
Councillor Moore, I think you wish
Thank
to-
you. I think my question has been answered in that last exchange, which was about whether what you were proposing, which you specifically mentioned training, it equally applied to some further work on the terms of reference and such like. And I infer from the conversation that indeed that's the case, in which case I would be content.
Right you are. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry.
Rolls?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Can I just add, it might be helpful to have a sort of kind of session which maybe captures other topics that we don't know yet that we need training on. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like some kind of something where, because it's difficult to know what you need training on until sometimes you get into the detail of it, particularly as a new member. So perhaps we could just have a bit of flex in the training programme to add some ad hoc pieces if there's appetite from other members and if it's merited.
Well, the other thing is, here this afternoon, none of us are actually aware as to what might come through from central government either, which obviously needs a sort of priority rating. Okay.
Can I respond to Councillor Rolls as well, please?
Yes, please.
Which is a very good point. There are things actually in these proposed terms of reference changes where, for instance, the Treasury Management's been mentioned. If it is agreed to include that then in the scope of the committee, you will need training on that one. It isn't included on the proposals at the moment, so that there will need to be some flexibility in scope for other additional areas or different areas. So it's a valid point.
Thanks, Julie.
And also just to say that this is all the kind of audit functionalities. There isn't any training factored in for the ethics element. So we would look at doing that as well. So the standards complaints and things, we have done some training on that reasonably recently, but we may need to include that as well.
Thank you. Members, do you require any further discussion on this agenda item?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I think we're going to be the most knowledgeable group amongst the council by the look of it.
Okay. In that case, we need a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation which is set out on page 26. I'll ask the clerk actually to read out the recommendation, if you will, please, Laura.
If you just bear with me, Chairman. So members, what we are asking you to agree today is that the Governance and Ethics Committee agrees to the proposal stated in the attached action plan. And if the committee agrees with the revised contents of the revised terms of reference, a recommendation needs to be brought back to the next meeting so that we can agree those terms of reference before they go on to full council. Full council will ultimately
Those
have to-
officers' recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Linden. A seconder. Councillor Cottam, thank you very much indeed. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show your hand. Thank you very much indeed. Clerk, would you like to?
And that looks unanimous, so we will put forward those recommendations and enact them in the way that's been agreed at the meeting this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much. With that, members, that actually concludes the business of this afternoon. Thank you very much. I'll see you all in February, if not before. Thank you.